Did you know that the Romans only had about 24 first names? They called it the praenomen. That's a Latin word literally meaning first name. Prae, first, nomen, name. By the time of the late Republic, which is the period of Roman history that most people are familiar with, there are only about 18 names still in use. Of these 18 names, only 5 were common, those being Gaius, Lucius, Marcus, Publius, and Quintus. You may recognize Gaius from Gaius Julius Caesar, the great general, or, if you prefer, genocider of Gauls, and you would also likely recognize Marcus from Caesar's right-hand man, Marcus Antonius, better known in English as Mark Antony. So what use is there in a name if there are so few options, you may ask? Well, naturally, this name is not very useful in a public setting. If you take a trip down to the forum and shout, "Hey Gaius," then half the crowd will think you're talking to them. So that's not helpful. Generally, in public life, people would be referred to by their family names. This is why history records the name Julius Caesar, and the name Gaius is rarely ever attached. In day-to-day living, that works fine, actually. It's only confusing for us looking back through history because we have to keep several generations sorted and differentiate between 3 different guys living decades apart from each other, all named Publius Decius Mus. But if you think about the kinds of situations you end up in on any given day, then you'll realize that most of the time, your family name would be enough. For the Romans, it was the same. So the praenomen was used in private settings with close personal friends and family. It also served a traditional function as an element of familial continuity. Generally, Roman families would settle on 2 or 3 names from the list and strictly stick to those names for their boys. For example, in the Claudius family, the praenomen Tiberius was very common. It wasn't one of those 5 popular names I mentioned earlier, but because the Claudii rose to great prominence in the imperial era, in fact, the first imperial dynasty is called the Julio-Claudian dynasty, the name Tiberius has an outsized representation in sources for the period because there weren't that many Tiberiuses, but the people who were called Tiberius were pretty important. In fact, the 3 Roman emperors from that dynasty that we call Tiberius, Claudius, and Nero were all actually called Tiberius Claudius Nero. Historians have just picked one of each of those names for them to be remembered by. Now you may be thinking to yourself, hey, these all sound like men's names. What about the women? Well, unfortunately, Roman women didn't really get names. If you were your father's only daughter, then you would be known only by the feminine version of his family name. So, the daughter of Julius Caesar was known simply as Julia. What if Caesar had 2 daughters, though? You can't just call them both Julia. Well, in this case, the older girl would be referred to as Julia Major, and the younger one would be called Julia Minor, literally translating as Julia the Elder and Julia the Younger. And if Caesar were blessed to have even more daughters than that, the firstborn would then be known as Julia Maxima, meaning Julia the Eldest, and the rest would be Julia Secunda, Julia Tertia, Julia Quarta, etc. Literally, Julia II, Julia III, and Julia IV. So really, the boys were very lucky to have a whole 18 names to choose from. An interesting consequence of this limited set of names is that the Romans actually developed standard abbreviations for them. If you go to Rome and look at the Latin inscriptions on the ancient buildings or read Latin text, then you will find the names written out as G.N. Pompeius for Gnaeus Pompeius, S.E.X. Quintilius Varus for Sextus Quintilius Varus, or, on my favorite example, the Roman Pantheon, you will see M. Agrippa L.F. Cos Tertium Fecit. M, as you might guess, stands for Marcus, so Marcus Agrippa. Then we have L.F. L stands for Lucius, and F was a common abbreviation for Filius, the Latin word for son. So we have Marcus Agrippa, son of Lucius, Cos Tertium Fecit. Cos just means consul, tertium meaning third, means he was consul for the third time. And fecit is a verb meaning built or made. So we have Marcus Agrippa, son of Lucius, in his third consulship, built this. Thank you for watching. Walete.